Last episode, we put the Hellcat Redeye engine into the Jeep, and in this episode, we'll do everything else to get this thing driving, starting with bending the line for my power steering pump. So here's my steering box, and that lighter line is the line that I just bent. It goes wee over here, makes a little figure 8 loop right there, and into the power steering pump. Wow. I know it looks bad, but it's way better than it used to be. So I'm checking it off the list. So I'm doing more shenanigans. This alternator fits, but the Hellcat one doesn't. And the reason, in part, is because these bolt runners are so much shorter on this one than on the Hellcats. So this bolt will fit, but this one won't. And then the only other difference is that this pulley is just a ½ an inch too shallow. So I pulled it off. I just wrapped the belt around it and then gave it some ugga-duggas. And we're just gonna try to shim it for now and see if I can get it to be in alignment, and then I don't have to cut my frame. So here I've got the alternator about halfway threaded in. It's exactly where it needs to be, and it looks like it aligns pretty well. This is the clearance we're working with here. This is how close I was to needing to notch the frame. Changing gears to fueling, I need to mount this fuel regulator about right here. I'm thinking is the best spot. So here's the bracket in action, holding up my fuel pressure regulator. So on the fuel lines, I need this one to go up there, and same with this one, all the way up there. I just bent this tubing. I used the coat hanger method to make a template, and here it is. I attached it on the bottom, and here's where it needs to go to. It's a little too close.
Bowie.
Come on, that's pretty good. You gotta admit. What do you think, Rue? So here is the final product. We got the oh my gosh. Now, I forgot to mention the whole reason I did hardline was because right around here is where the exhaust is going. So I went ahead and I fabricated all the lines necessary. Those go down. That is all the fuel lines done. Okay, now it's time to install this Hellcat fuel pump. Means I gotta drop the fuel tank. Let's do it. So here is my old fuel pump, and then this is the one we gotta fit in its place. I realized that this diameter right here is precisely the same diameter of this coolant hose. So I'm gonna snip off just a little bit and then clamp it down so that I'm not just on the metal. Yeah, honestly, I'm pretty happy with this. It doesn't fit. The new fuel pump was just a little bit too tall, so I had to cut the hard line shorter to get the necessary clearance. It's not even hot. Okay, my flare tool was not gonna fit right here. So I was thinking, how am I going to make sure it doesn't leak? I've got a die on here, and I'm thinking if I can just give this thing some threads, clamp down the rubber hose on those threads, that's gonna seal, right? Look at those threads. I just went really slow and used lots of lubrication. I have no doubt in my mind that if I clamp a hose onto that it's gonna hold fuel pressure. This is some engineering right here, folks. Y'all take some notes right now. Let's make sure it fits. And it does. What do we have here? It's a mid-sump conversion Holley oil pan. Here we are under the Jeep with the front sump car style oil pan. If you can see, I only have a finger width gap between my axle and the oil pan. So if I had any articulation, this is gonna and I'm gonna need a new oil pan at best, and at worst, I'm gonna need a whole new engine.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Line me up. So I go from the center outward. This new mid-sump oil pan gives plenty of clearance for my suspension to articulate without destroying anything. I gotta come back, torque these down, but it's on. Okay, so I'm currently under the Jeep, and with the angle that this exhaust needs to be at, it's just a little bit too long and it contacts my frame rail. So I'm thinking I can notch it here, weld on a V-band clamp, and get away with that. Here we are on the driver's side, and this thing fits very nicely. Once I felt the exhaust was good enough, I focused on cooling. So my dad and I found this transmission cooler a couple weeks ago at the junkyard. That's where it gets messy. Okay, here we go. Nice. And I'm gonna try to use it as the Supercharger's intercooler. Here's the line that came off of it. I'm gonna flare this end so that I can put a 3/4 inch tube on there. Okay, so I've created these tabs on all 4 corners. Now this is regularly where my AC condenser would mount. So the idea is that I'll run box tube in the shape of a U all the way back up so that I don't contact all this stuff. And then make a couple support bars and mount this here. There is the bracket I just made. Here's one I made a little bit earlier. You know, the welds aren't great, but the fitment is impeccable. Next on the to-do list is mounting this intercooler reservoir, and it needs to be up pretty high. I have these unused bolt holes, so hopefully I can mount it here and bring up some brackets to these 2 holes on either side. Hopefully my hood will still shut. Okay, I lathered up the cap with some grease. We're gonna see if it'll shut. It was real close. I pushed it back. Hopefully it's enough this time. Certainly not enough. So I lowered the reservoir just a tiny bit. It's at a good height, and I push it back a little bit, and it clears the hood now. So the next thing with these brackets is to weld a bar straight between the 2 so that I can mount this pump. This time it fits. This thing ain't going anywhere. It's a little wobbly. At this point, I need to route the intercooler lines to the pump, then to the reservoir, and then back into the intercooler itself. This is the technique I used to bend the rubber hose, using a mandrel and a heat gun before letting it cool to keep its shape. And after a full day of tube bending, so got a big update. I've got all the intercooler lines plumbed from the intercooler to the reservoir, to the pump itself, and then over to this radiator. And then, additionally, I got the heater hoses all connected, I think. I've got all of the radiators installed. This is the intercooler, behind that is the AC, and then I've finally got my proper custom-made radiator, and the fan fits, but just barely. How do I look? The Holley ECU is mounted on the passenger side firewall, so my plan with this harness is to go up from the driver's side underneath the car, over my bell housing, and then hook up the inputs. That'll make sure my coil, fuel, and crank sensor connectors are in the right area so that I can reach everything nicely. Watch this. Okay. Nice. I've got the connectors in my hands. Just gotta connect them. I'm only working with the very tips of my fingers, and I literally just can't get enough force to click this stupid thing in. Huh, yes. Oh boy, am I happy that's over. All right, so I consider the wiring complete. I'm gonna slap the battery in here, connect it, and hope that it doesn't short anything out instantly. Okay, I'm gonna go turn the key. Y'all tell me if anything starts smoking. Oh, that's the fuel pressure. Nothing's smoking. Yes. Everything was falling into place to start the engine before I noticed this issue. Note how this hole for the starter almost aligns with this hole for the transmission. And then notice how on this bell housing, it's maybe 1 bolt width lower. And this is the bell housing I've been testing on, and now my starter doesn't fit because it contacts the exhaust. I didn't know that they were different. And that slight detail is why I'm not gonna be able to start it right now, which sucks. All right, new exhaust solution.
You don't want to see me rage.
Check out this clearance right there. Boom! Look at that tack weld, and look at this egregious angle we got going on here. They're chewing on the same stick. Oh yeah, look at these welds. Okay, don't look at that one, okay? That was like a 1-inch gap, don't worry about it. This is always the best part of a project. Delicious distilled water. Nothing is leaking so far. It's the last thing I gotta fill up. Let's hope the luck stays around. So I do have a small leak in the coolant system. This is one of my heater hoses on the back of the engine.
I got the heater hoses all connected, I think.
I'll have to take off the supercharger and fix that, but it's not gonna keep me from running this little leak right here. So let's do it. 3, 2, 1. Sounded like it worked. Test drive time. Can't forget about Dalton, can we? Nice. My co-pilot and I were off, but we didn't make it very far before. Can you see that it's blown? Fuel pump fuse, 30 amps not enough. We're going 50. Convenient with the hood off. I would have driven more, but it's too loud to handle, and there's also a leak in my front main seal. You know what that means. I'm super happy with how it's turning out, and in the next video we'll tackle exhaust and finally do some actual launches. Thank you for watching.